Do you find with men particularly, because this kind of popped in my head when you were talking a second ago, but it's almost like I feel like a lot of men are avoidant, which is our childhood trauma speaking out. I'm guilty as charged. I hate facing pretty much everything, it seems like sometimes straight
Same.
on, or at least without a lot of thinking. So do you think it's like a piece of avoidant from doing that reflection and just wanting to avoid maybe you're doing the wrong things or you've been doing the wrong things or you avoid
I
being
think
sick?
I think so, but I also think that it's even deeper than that. Um, just one of the other reasons that I loved Jacques Cousteau was because he was an image of masculinity that I had never seen before. You know, if you've ever seen him, he was a skinny little French guy. He was not aggressive. He was just competent and cool and amazing in all these really interesting ways. And it was the kind of man that I wanted to become, but it's not the kind of man that society says men should be like. Right, we're told, and I see it really heavily as a Latino and the sort of immigrant communities. But I know, having talked to people all over the world, that it's something that resonates way beyond that. But men are told that you have to be stoic, you have to be immovable in the face of pressure. And that anything that means that you're disclosing your vulnerabilities, anything that shows your weaknesses, are a failure of you as a man. So men don't learn to communicate because we are chastised for it. We're definitely not rewarded for it. And it's something that influences and impacts our individual lives, our families, our communities, our societies. The fact that men are unwilling to say when they're not okay, when they need help, is something that I think is an epidemic that we suffer from. You know, and it's it's really hard. Like when you've been trained your whole life to be a particular way, it's really tough to retrain yourself to say when you're not okay, and to create the spaces where you can express those vulnerabilities. You know, like
Yeah.
I've been married once before. I'm married now. I've been married once before, and I know that the hardest part about my previous relationship was that inability to communicate. I was not somebody who was able to communicate when I was not okay, and I became a people pleaser, deep
Mm.
people pleaser, to the point where I began to lose my own identity, my own sense of self. And it blows my mind now to be in a different situation, to have grown so much beyond that, to have a partner who's super receptive and super open, and I know isn't going to judge me if I express those vulnerabilities to her, you know. So it's it's such a journey, but the thing from the perspective of men, I think, is really, really important, that guys need to start opening up a little bit, creating those spaces, and understanding that vulnerability and expressing your vulnerability, in fact, is a kind of strength. It's, I'm so strong, I am so secure in who and what I am, that I'm willing to show you what my weaknesses
Yeah.
are, and I'm willing to accept you for yours as well. I think I, man, you touched on something that sort of
Yeah.
talks to my heart, you know, because I think it's something that really can transform societies. Yeah.
I agree with you completely. And a lot of the advocacy work that I try to do, and it's funny you mentioned the listeners earlier, it's spread out a little bit now, but it used to be like 96% women that were millennials. So it's changing a little bit, but that's kind of where my audience is from. But the whole men's mental health, wellness, toxic masculinity, whatever words you could throw all the buzzwords out, right? But what I found from my experience, and I am very well aware of how I behave now when I'm not okay. I'm still working to do better on how to express it and how to manage it. I think
Yeah.
we all will, but man, I think about how I used to be so reactive, easily irritable, frustrated, quick to lose my temper, I guess. And I look back on like my whole family experience and it's like, well, that's where that came from. And it just, the generational piece of it just comes down to men. And then I also agree that it is a strength when you can express yourself, even if it's just a little bit at first, because not only are you strong for doing that, but you're doing it in a society that is just learning how to accept that from a man. And that societal impact and that stigma, like that is its own beast to overcome mentally, for anyone really, but especially I think in some cases for men.
Yeah, yeah. It's I speak a lot to a group of people that I call trailblazers, and it's the people who are you're a trailblazer. You're doing it for the first time. You don't necessarily have a role model. You don't have a
A
blueprint
template.
to
Yeah.
go by exactly, and so everything feels really risky a lot of the time when you're out there trailblazing, and you know that there are people who will judge you for it and who will not they're not ready for your journey yet, and you have to have the confidence, the security, the knowledge that this is taking you in the right direction to keep pushing, because the truth is that the louder the haters are, most likely the more they need to hear the message that you're putting out,
I
so
completely agree. And as you know, with my online presence and talking about men's mental health and just the internet in general, it's so much easier to be cruel. People are so much more likely to send a nasty comment or a DM or talk about you in like negative ways. And a lot of times I actually think these people don't even know that you see it. I think there's such a disconnect there that the internet gives, because half this stuff
yeah,
is not something people would say to someone's face
that's
or
right.
even to someone else, maybe like behind their back, but not to the extent that they do on the internet. And where I think that hurts, especially, you know, like men, which we're talking about, or other areas where it's difficult to express yourself, is that it just kind of amplifies this negativity, which makes it even scarier than opening up to your partner or opening up to a close friend or something like that.
I I could not agree more. So much of the internet, people don't realize that there's someone on the other end of that comment who's
So right.
receiving it, and it has an impact. It's a voice that you're hearing. When
Yeah.
in starting our own business, there's been a good amount of social media presence that we've had out there, and it is it's painful to see those things when especially when you're like us and we're putting out what we see as a message of positivity and a message of empowerment. And man, I don't see anything. It's hard for me to understand how somebody could find negativity in the things that we put out, and yet people do. And it's a blow. It's tough.
It's
You've put yourself out there. Not only did somebody put it out there, but everyone has seen it, and you have to take a minute to recover. You question yourself all the time. That self-confidence takes a hit, and you have to remember. My wife actually has a really interesting thing that she does exactly in those situations. She has an archive of all of her testimonials
of the
of
people she's worked with.
people she's worked with,
Yeah.
lives that are eternally changed for the better because of the work that they've done with her. And oftentimes even people who've just read the book and haven't even worked with her but really felt it. And anytime one of those haters kind of basically comes along, that's her strategy. She goes back to her
That's
testimonials and says, you know what, I've changed lives. I'm making an impact. I'm doing what's aligned with me. And it's part of
that's
your
really
resilience
smart.
strategy. Yeah, it's part
Yeah,
of a
it's really
resilience
smart.
strategy, right? Life happens. Life is going to knock you down. Sometimes it's haters and trolls, and sometimes it's things that happen out in the world. And you have to know that no matter how much you try to be invulnerable, those things will happen. Life will happen. Even if you're not on social media, things will happen to you.
Oh
And
yeah.
you need those resilience tools. And those resilience tools, you need to use them regularly, not just when
Like
you're
an
in crisis.
exercise. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and
Exercising is a
whatever it
lot
is that
harder
works
when
for
you
you.
haven't done it for 3 years. You know,
That's
it's
right.
yeah.
That's right. We have a quote that says basically it's a lot harder to speed up from a slowdown than to restart from zero. basically, right?
That's
You know,
so
so
good.
the resilience tools, keeping them with you all the time. You know, when something hits, sure, you slow down a little bit, but you're not starting from ground zero, and it's a lot easier to get back up and keep going.